be here anyway. But it's unfortunate, I think, that they're neglecting the broader participation, which I'm assuming the survey was, but maybe it wasn't. All right. Okay, so if there's no questions, I want to jump right back to the spreadsheet that we'd started working on and finish this up. There was one question that came up over the weekend, and let me just clarify. On the homework problem that I gave you, it had a pipe network, and it had some arrows going out the nodes, and it said C, C, and then it equals. That's the demand. Just like everything else, sometimes we like to change the variables just to keep you on your toes, right? I borrowed that figure, I think. No, I didn't borrow that figure. I think I made that figure. Can't remember. And I don't know why I used C. That was probably because it's one point we use C for demand. Then a few years ago, I decided D made more sense. But anyway, maybe I did borrow that figure. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. So that's what it is. So coming back to this now, we completed 2 of the continuity equations. We blow this up a little bit here. We'll lose some of the equations, but you'll be able to see this a little better. We've completed 2 of the continuity equations, 1 of the energy equations, and then we started on the pseudo loop. We got out of time. So let's go back and finish this. All right. So we did equation or node 1, node 2, and now we can do node 3 for the continuity equation. Node 3 then is going to be the first one is q sub 3. So 0, 0, 0, q sub 3 is going to be a positive 1. Q sub 4 is
Can you share your screen with us online, please?
I thought I did that. I apologize. That would help quite a bit. Let me do that. Thank you. There we go. Okay. So yeah, going back, the third continuity equation, first up here we have it written. And so the first one is 0, the second one is 0 because there's no Q1 or Q2. We have a coefficient of 1 in front of Q sub 3, so that comes down here. Coefficient of negative 1 in front of Q sub 4, and then nothing till Q sub 8. So I'm going to put zeros in there till I get Q sub 8, and then we have a negative 1. And then over on the demand side, we have 0.06. All right, going down to equation 4, which is at node 5. Nothing until Q sub 5, so zeros go in there. Q sub 5, we have a negative 1. Q sub 6, we have a 1. Q sub 7, a 1. And no Q sub 8, so 0. And the demand in that node is 0.075. All right, and then node 4, we just have 2, Q sub 4 and Q sub 5. So the zeros in there until we get to 4, and then we can put 1 in there, and 1 for 5, and then zeros the rest of the way out. And hopefully you should see that one of these values is going to be negative, one or both. Well, I guess it can't be both. Well, I guess they could. Going in, no, there's, I guess actually it's positive that it's possible they could both be positive because we have 0.1 going out. So I can't make that statement until we know if one of them is bigger than 0.1, then the other one has to change direction. All right, so there's all our continuity equations. Now we can come down and do the energy equation. So we've got the first energy equation, now doing the second energy equation. Our first node that we hit, or first pipe, I should say, is Q sub 3. So I'm going to put 0, 0, and get to Q sub 3. We're going to have a negative C sub 3, which, right, 1, 2, how can I miss some pipelines? Here we go. Okay, 1, 2, 3, right there. And remember, pipeline 3 had the globe valve in it. So I have to include that in the value. All right, so I'll include that in the value. I'm going to make that absolute reference. Times then the absolute value of Q sub 2, I'm sorry, Q sub 3. So I grab that value over there. And that then gives me my coefficient matrix for C sub 3. And then I need negative C sub 4, so kind of the same thing. So minus C sub 4, absolute value, times then Q, or absolute value of Q sub 4. Okay. Q sub 5. So, and that's a positive value. So I can grab Q sub 5 up here. We'll make that absolute reference times then the absolute value of Q sub 5. Nothing for Q sub 6. And then we have Q sub 7. Okay, and that's a positive value. So Q sub 7, grab my C value, absolute reference times the absolute value of Q sub 7. And nothing for Q sub 8. So 0, and that whole equation is equal to 0 up here. So there is nothing in the B vector for that. I have one value left, and that is the pseudo loop. And we completed the first value in the pseudo loop. Move this out of the way here. Okay. So we have C sub 1 and C sub 2 and C sub 3 and C sub 8. So C sub 1 got put in there. Now we're going to do pipe number 2. So that is then C sub 2, absolute reference, times then the absolute value of Q sub 2. And it's done there. And then we have 3. So grab C sub 3 with our globe valve. Make that a fixed reference times then the absolute value of Q sub 3. And I think the last one was 8, right? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, and 8. And that's a positive value as well. So I put zeros in here for the rest of these. I get over here to 8, and I'm going to take C sub 8, make that a fixed reference times the absolute value of Q sub 8. And that's in there now. And then when I come over here to the last part, remember this is the known values. So my equation up here, if I scoot over just a little bit, is Q or GL, the hydraulic grade line at A minus the hydraulic grade line at B. And so the hydraulic grade line at A was 132, and the one at B was 120. So that fits in there, it's 12. So now I've created this matrix. And now I can go ahead and solve this matrix. So I'm going to come over here and create my Q new. Okay. And so I need to do my matrix multiplication. So M mult. And my first array then is going to be the inverse of my A matrix. So I first have to apply the inverse of it. So M inverse of my A matrix, or my coefficient matrix, whatever you want to call it. And that gives me my first array. And then my second array is the B vector right here. All right. So now that I've got those two arrays in there, I can go ahead and hit enter. It solves for the first cell, but I want it to solve for the rest. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight then where I expect the answers to go. Hit F2 and do Control Shift Enter. Okay. Now let me come back and do that again. All right. So I've put my equation in there. My matrix multiplication, M mult. And Excel tells me I need to have array 1 times array 2, and I know the first array is the inverse of my coefficient matrix multiplied by my B vector. So I take the inverse of my coefficient matrix, put in the B vector, gives me the first value. To get the rest of them, I'm going to go ahead and highlight where I expect the answers to be. Hit F2 to bring it up into edit mode. And I think you can double click on it too, but I'm in the habit of hitting F2. Then I push simultaneously the keys Shift, Control, Shift, Enter, and it fills that in. Any questions on that? Okay, so that's just one iteration. So now we have to do more iterations. So knowing that it helps to take the average, I'm going to go ahead and take the average as part of my iterative process. So rather than my guess over here, I'm going to go ahead and find the average and make that my guess. Okay, so I'm going to take the average of my first guess and my Q new, with the concept in mind that I'm going to be copying this down. So I leave 2 spaces. You could do 1, you could do 3, you could do 5. I just do 2. It's two rows right here to give a little space between my matrices. I can also copy down my notation down here if I want to. So now my average flow for Q1 was my guess plus what I calculated for Q new. All right. And now when I copy this down, it's going to take and calculate the average for all those. Okay. And now I can go ahead and calculate my new vector, if you will. I'm sorry, my new matrix multiplication. And whoops, I didn't do that right. If I've done that correctly, I should, for my coefficient values, I'm sorry, for my energy, but my coefficients for my energy equations, I should be pulling my Q average, the correct Q average, because everything is now relative references. Because up here, where I pulled the one over, about 4 columns and up a couple of columns, down here, I'm doing the same thing, but relative to my new average. All right. Well, let's do a couple of quick checks. I come back to my diagram. Go ahead.
Sorry, can you do that again where you highlighted everything? How did you bring it to the bottom there?
Okay, so you're saying when I'm right here? Lou,
Yes.
is that okay? All right, so I went back too far here, but go ahead and copy my average down. Okay, so now what I want to do is basically copy and paste this whole matrix right here. Both the coefficient matrix, my B vector, and my matrix multiplication. So I can copy the whole thing, including my labels for the rows and columns, or I can just decide, you know what, I don't care about the rows and columns, and I just want this right here. And I'll do Control C, or you can right mouse click and do copy. I'm used to the smart commands because, I grew up back when we were still using sticks and stones for computers. We didn't have a mouse. Imagine the days when the computer didn't have a mouse. Did everything on the keyboard. A mouse is nice for most things, but the quick keys are actually kind of fast for a lot of things as well. So anyway, I copy that. Now I come down here, and I just have to make sure that I copy this relative correctly to where I want it to go. So if this is row 1, column 1, I want to put my cursor in row 1, column 1 of the new matrix. So now I'm going to go ahead and paste. I do Control V for paste, or you can just paste using the mouse. And now this is my new matrix, and I check to make sure that I am referencing. So this one right here should reference Q sub 2, and it does. But it grabs the new average value, because remember we wanted to average with we took Q new up here, and we would average that to slow down how fast this iterates, so we don't keep bouncing on either side of the answer. Did that explain everything, Lou?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else having problems seeing that, or need me to go back and do the matrix multiplication? I'd be happy to do it again. We're good to go. Okay. So now that I have this, and I've kind of reset it up once, I can just use Excel's copy command to make my life easy. But before we do that, I wanted to highlight, if I come back here to the diagram, remember that pipe 7 is the common pipe between my 2 loops. And so if I have my clockwise rotation in loop 1 and my clockwise rotation in loop 2, then pipe 7 should be equal and opposite, and here it is right there. The values of pipe 7 are equal and opposite in both of those matrices, as expected. All right, so that's one little simple check you can do to see if you've made a mistake somewhere. All right, okay, so now I can go ahead and I'm going to copy this down, and knowing that the second coefficient matrix was slid down 2 rows, when I copy it, I also want to copy down 2 rows so everything stays relative to the new values that I need to grab. So I'm going to highlight the whole thing. I'm going to grab the little square over here and just drag that down now and copy those matrices. Some distance down here, all right? And then need to make sure that we tell Excel we want it to copy the cells, not fill the cell formats. Because if you notice, when you look at this right now, my coefficient matrix where I had a bunch of 1s and 0s at the top, it now is full of numbers because it thought I was filling a series. It said, I can fill that in for you. I can save you some work. Well, we don't want it filled in. We want those cells copied. So I select copy. You see the coefficient matrix went back to the 1s and 0s for the continuity equation. And you can see that the answer down here hasn't quite converged yet, but it's getting there. Well, let me go down to the bottom here because it jumped back up the top. Okay, when I get down here, you can see that it has converged. That these values right here are these values right there. So we have converged to an answer. Okay. And that would be then my final answer for this system. All right. Any questions on that? Okay, does anyone want to see the matrix method done again with the circular option? Maybe clarified. Matrix method with the circular option. I'd be happy to show it, but I got to see a hand. Okay, got a couple hands here. Be happy to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this sheet over. So I'll create a copy, come down here, and rename this one matrix. Matrix. Okay. I'm going to rename this one circular. Keep track. And I can actually, I'm going to delete all this going right back up to the top, except for my first one. Shift cell orange. Just delete those. There we go. Okay. All right. So when I come back up here, oops, I didn't get them all, did I? All right. There we go. All right. Okay. Well, in fact, I can just take, well, let's take them all out. There we go. All right, finally, I got it. I have my first matrix that we've already done. And there's more than one way of doing this. Let's go ahead and, in fact, save ourselves a little bit of trouble. We're going to keep the second one because then it's just going to make our life a whole lot easier. All right. So I've got my original matrix, iteration 1, and let's put our labels back on there just to make things look a little nicer. And I'm going to call this one iteration 2. All right, so here's iteration 2. A coefficient matrix. It's always nice to kind of spend a few minutes and clean these up if you like. I can get my B vectors over here. Okay, and my final answers. Now, if I want to do a circular one, rather than keep copying my values down, I'll clean these values up. It's got a little too much precision going on there. We'll stay at 3 decimals. This is cubic meters per second, so we could even justify going out to 4. We could turn that into liters per second. In fact, let's do that. Keep that at 4. All right. So now it's a fairly simple trick because we want to use the power of Excel to take our final value and bring it back around to the top. So this is a circular reference. We're using a value to calculate a value that we used in our original value. And a lot of times, in fact, most times, circular references may get you in trouble because you just put you in an infinite loop and it never kicks you out. All right. But in this type of iterative process, it's really powerful. What you need to remember in Excel is that Excel calculates values from left to right, top to bottom. So if you start doing circular references and you get these out of order, where you go down to the bottom of the sheet and you start grabbing a value up at the top of the sheet to come down here and recalculate this value that's going to be used in that one, your spreadsheet's going to crash. But if you understand the order that it calculates, once again, left to right, top to bottom, and everything flows down in a nice order, then the circular reference becomes a powerful tool in engineering. So once I have this, I can just go ahead then and convert my guess into my second calculated value. I could even do it down here to the first average. I don't need this second matrix, but I think that makes a lot more sense to students to let it go through 2 iterations before you go over here and grab this. Okay, so I'm going to bring my second average, or my second Q new, and I'm actually going to bring that back up as my original guess. When I do that, if my circular method is not turned on, it usually screams, but this must be turned back on again. So once I have that, I can copy it down. Note, when I just copy it down, this means that this one right there, Q sub 8, is going to come over and grab my second Q sub 8. It's going to bring that back up to the top. Okay.
How did you turn it on the circular reference
Okay.
again?
Yes, great question. I was just going to cover that again. So in case yours isn't turned on, I go into File and then Options. So come up to the File tab, takes you back to this sheet right here. At the bottom on the left-hand side, you have the Options. All right. Now Options brings up, when I click on Options, it brings up this dialog box. And the second thing I want on this dialog box is the formulas. So it has a bunch of tabs down the side. I'm going to go ahead and click on Formulas. And over here it says Enable Iterative Calculations. Okay, that's usually checked off. The default for Excel is to turn that off. I'm going to go ahead and click that back on. I'm going to change my iterations though to 1. So I can step you through this. Okay. Now, if it's at 100, it's just going to go and it's going to spit out after 100 iterations. Now, 1, I'm going to hit F9. F9 is recalculate. So when I do this, come down here, you can see that my answers are not the same. Let me go ahead and highlight. There's Q1 and there's Q1. Those two are not the same. So my calculation has not converged. So now as I go and hit F9, which is recalculate, you can see those numbers changing. Okay, and I'm going to push them a little faster and just kind of hold it down. And what have I messed up here? I've messed something up. Let's see. Oh, okay. That should be oscillating. Is that oscillating? 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah, it oscillates. Okay, so I inadvertently kicked myself out of the average. That was not smart of me. Because this value over here that I'm using for my initial guess is not the average now, right? I used my average to calculate it, but I didn't use the average when I brought it back up. So I need to come over here and either recalculate the average based on this and this average value there, which is the old value, or I can actually grab this average and bring it up. So for example, let me show you here. Well, but I haven't taken advantage of the second matrix. So let's do this. Let's take another average over here. Okay, so I'm going to take the average of my new value and my old value. Okay. So I just got myself in the numerical loop there because I started to oscillate my solutions. Now I'm going to actually come up here. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so you can see the whole thing. For my guess, I'm going to grab the average value. And then I'm going to copy that down to grab all of my average values. Okay. So once again, now my new guess is my average at the end of my calculations. Now when I go ahead and hit F9, this should start to converge a little better. So I'm going to hit a bunch of them, and you can see that it is now, it's not converging. So what have I done wrong again? Okay, I made a mistake somewhere in my spreadsheet here. You go back to the matrix over here. You go back to the matrix method. And these are not oscillating. So what did I do when I copy that over? What did I change? I grab my answers from my matrix method right here. I'm going to put those in as my initial guesses. And with this as my initial guess, this coefficient matrix then, I'm going to clean that up a little bit. This coefficient matrix should match the coefficient matrix down here at the end of this one. Pretty special, so I just get the values. And it doesn't. Oh, I shifted that over. Let me shift this back. Okay. Now I guess it does, doesn't it? Okay, that matches. So those values are correct.
Your lower left field on that matrix you copied down was 494 in one of them and then 0 in the next. I see that as just one difference.
Oh. Oh, you're right there. Okay, so why does this one have a value in my energy equation? My energy equation, I do have a Q1, so why my matrix one, what happened to that? Okay, so this is why I like to name those coefficients rather than use the fixed reference. You know, C.1, C.2, because this is a pretty common error for me. Doesn't mean it's an error for you. But because I didn't make that a fixed reference, G3 then, right here, every time I copy that down, that moves. And that, whoops, that's not the one I want. I want a G3 here. That makes a mistake.
What was the quick?
Okay, so if I had come up here and this little box up here in the left, where it says B15, that references the cell where that's located. I can actually click on that and call that a name. So C.1. Now, I can't do C1 because C1 is a standard name in Excel, stands for column 1. But if I do C.1, or I could name it Bob, or I could name it Apple, whatever, give it a name. But C.1 references to me that it's coefficient pipe 1. And so if I came down here now, I could just use that name rather than a cell number, and that name is tied to that cell always. Okay, so C.1 right there, and okay, so now I should be able to copy this down. Oh, let's see, copy down to that, right? And it hasn't converged, which tells me I have another problem somewhere.
Be sure to set it to copy and not fill.
Oh, thank you. Common mistake, right? Okay. It's a little embarrassing for me to sit up here and it doesn't work out. It's like, uh-oh, what have I done? But now you can see, now that we use copy rather than fill, it has converged. And those answers are matching. Okay. And then we go back to circular, and most likely the same error is right there. So I'm going to copy this cell right there, down to there. And why did it go to 0? G13. Oh, because I didn't fix it up here as well. Let me fix this one. I'm just going to make that a fixed reference and copy that cell down there. So that was that one particular cell that was causing the problem. And okay, so now I can grab my average values over here and copy those down. And hit F9. See if we can get this to converge. And it converges, but it converges to a different answer. Because that is not the same as what we had over here, right? It's not the same. Okay. So this is where I'd go into some sort of debugging mode, if you will, and try to figure out which one's the correct one. And this is actually, you know, I am on one hand embarrassed by this occurring, but on the other hand, this is real world, and this is what you have to be careful of when you sit down and do some programming on your own, whether it's inside of, you know, a lot of engineering firms like to use MathCAD to write up equations to solve structural problems. And I don't care if it's MathCAD or Excel, if you write up a program that helps you be more efficient because you're doing the calculations over and over again, you need to spend some time and error check it to make sure that it's okay. Because you don't want that error propagating. And that error may be no big deal right now when you're doing something and you say, oh, that's a reasonable answer, let's go with it. But if you pull that program up again and using it in a slightly different scenario, you could produce some problems, some errors, you know, that could be catastrophic. That's kind of going a little extreme, but potential that it could be that way. And even commercial software programs, by the way, they try to do error checking, but it's on occasion they make mistakes still. And that's why they have upgrades and bug fixes. The commercial software, you know, that I use for my research and also have done consulting with in the past, Flow3D, it's a high-end computational fluid dynamics software. They got up to version 7 and 8 and still they found some errors that were kind of embarrassing for them in a sense. Kind of like, whoops, that shouldn't have been that way, but it happens. So the question is now how do we fix this? Well, we have a couple.
Dr. Savage, just as a note, in that iteration 2, again, that lower left cell where it was G13 or something like that, in iteration 2, in the second one, yeah, there, that bottom. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it was absolutely referenced to G3. I thought it had said G13 at some point, but no, we're good. Sorry, you're good.
That's fine. I'm glad, yeah, if you're looking for it, that's good. I appreciate it. So there's a couple ways to check this. We can actually try a different method. So in other words, we could stick the solve, we could try the solver method and see what value the solver method came up with, because the solver method's already been checked if we can get the equations put in right. Or we can come back, and I'm not sure that my matrix method now is the correct one. You know, I'm wondering if I change something else in here. So these are the same pipes. They should be equal and opposite. They should be equal and opposite. That looks good. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 7. Okay, equal and opposite. 2, 8. So I can come back to my matrix method here, grab what I think is the solution. But this kind of bothers me, to be honest. I might go in and check conservation of mass to see how this fits, especially that pipe where the two come together. We have that outflow. Does that really match up? It should, but I'll grab those values and bring them over here. I'm going to put them in here for my guess. I'm also going to come down here and put it in for the guess. And then I'm going to check, does my matrix on top match the matrix on the bottom? Okay. And it appears that it does. So that means I am grabbing the right values. Okay, so how does my B vector look? All right, and then to make sure I'm not grabbing any of these values for my second matrix, I'm going to delete all those and just see if anything changes in my second matrix, and it doesn't there. Okay. All right, so that looks good. And now if I come back, so up here and take the average of this, comma, this. Stick that in there for those. Okay. This is what bothers me is when I stick that in, my Q new should be pretty close. If these are the actual answers that I got from my matrix method on the other sheet, if these are the correct answers, my Q new should be really close to them, and they're not. So that bothers me, thinking that I've messed something up on my matrix solution. And so I'm going to actually use my circular one here. So this then is the average there, and I'm going to check this down here. Average there. Okay. Check the average between these guys. All right, now I'm going to bring that back up, use my circular method, bringing my average back up there. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and just iterate, and I'll hold down F9 to iterate till this goes to 0 until it stops changing. And now my assumption is that my circular method is going to be the correct method, and my matrix that is wrong. So I can grab these values here and bring this back over to my matrix and stick that into my matrix. Is my guess. Okay, special there, okay. And then I can grab this right here and see how that compares with my coefficient matrix over on the circular one. And once again, I'm having problems in that little cell right there. So which cell did I not do paste special on that? Let me see. Yeah, I did. Okay, so what are we referencing here? This gas with the absolute, oh, the C1 with that gas. Okay, that looks good. That gas with C1. So come back to circular. And I'm referencing my average P3.
The only difference is you have the absolute, like the dollar signs, absolute reference is on this one, but the other one isn't.
The other one,
But the other
I went to the name.
Ones, like the names.
Yeah, I went to
Should be-
C1, which is still, this one I made my mistake. This right here, rather than using my, you see what I did there? Let me shrink that down.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Yeah, you used a Q value instead of one of the C values.
correct, yes. So the blue color means that I use this value rather than the C value up here.
Mhm.
So I actually need to change that name. So I can do the hotkeys for this. I'm trying to remember where it is up here in the matrix, or Alt-I, where's Alt-I? Insert, and then somewhere around here is where we define those. It's somewhere up there in the menu, the name manager, and I can now just go ahead and delete that name. And now if I come back to that value right here, well, if I come up here and name this one C.1, okay? Now let's see if I got this right one there. Now I got the right one, and that one is now the right one. So the rest of them down here should be, yeah, should be okay. And we shrink this back down in size here. So now they match up. No, they still don't match up, do they? Okay, here's my matrix values. My circular values converge. They did not. There we go. Now they converged. It's not letting me copy that now. Copy. Special values. Okay, now they're the same thing. Okay. So be very careful with fixed references, whether you use names or the dollar sign to fix them. That's a common mistake. Grab them wrong, flow rate's a common mistake. And the signs on the continuity equation tend to be a common mistake as well. All right. We're way out of time. Hopefully you can do this, and hopefully you can do the solver method as well. If you get stuck on the solver method, let me know. We can cover the solver method again on Wednesday. All right. So have a great day. We'll see you on Wednesday.